I need to create a story written in a first-person narrative style, using a conversational and intimate tone. The story should explore an unexpected but consensual and deeply emotional experience. The story should be about the day my son's friend returned with something important, and it should feature relatable characters, subtle tension, and vivid descriptions of the setting and interactions. You have to start the story with a short summary storytelling with clickbait to intrigue the audience. In first seconds in the story should say, "Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years." Then start the story. Do not write sexy or critical words, no intimate words. Follow YouTube rules. The narrative should emphasize emotional connection, personal discovery, and mutual respect between characters. Detailed imagery should enhance the atmosphere, allowing the story to build naturally to its climax and conclude with a sense of reflection and growth. The main character is a woman who tells the story, and the target audience is viewers aged 55+ men. The total length of the story should be approximately 15,000 characters. Know that there are 4 chapters in total. Each new chapter is a continuation of the story. My target is an English-speaking audience, specifically the United States of America, 55+ age audience. Story write in this direct chat, not in the notepad. I need this story for my YouTube video, so the story shouldn't violate YouTube's monetization rules. The main character is a woman between the ages of 40 and 60. Here's my prompt. It has 4 chapters. First, start with writing chapter 1. After that, I will tell you to write chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4. Do not mention chapter heading, and do not write with asterisks and no bold text. No italic text. Each chapter length maximum 3,000 characters. Please write only chapter 1 now. Do not write chapter 2, chapter 3, or chapter 4 until I ask. Do not include chapter headings. Do not use asterisks, bold, or italic formatting. Write the story directly in this chat. It wasn't like Ethan to sleep in. Even on weekends, he was usually up early, always in motion. But that morning, I found him tangled in his sheets, snoring lightly, his messy brown hair falling across his face. I stood at his door for a moment, watching him, the quiet of the house settling around me. It was strange how quickly things could change. Yesterday, everything was the same. But today, nothing felt familiar. I knocked softly on the doorframe, not wanting to startle him. "Ethan," I called, my voice quiet but insistent. "Ethan, you need to wake up. Someone's here to see you." He groaned, muffled by the pillow, and I smiled to myself. "It's Michael," I added, figuring that would rouse him more than any amount of gentle prodding. His head shot up from the pillow, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and confusion. "Michael? What's he doing here?" "I don't know," I said, my voice cautious. "But he's downstairs, and he's asking for you." He seemed upset, I guess. Ethan blinked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "I'll be down in a minute," he muttered, still half asleep, before rolling back over onto his side. I left him to it, retreating downstairs to the kitchen, where Michael was still sitting at the table, staring out the window. He looked up when I re-entered the room, his gaze softening just a little. The weight in his eyes hadn't lifted, but there was a flicker of relief in his expression. "Thanks for waiting," I said, keeping my tone light. "Ethan's getting up now. He'll be down shortly." Michael nodded, his hands gripping the edge of the table like he was trying to anchor himself to something solid. "I appreciate it," he muttered, but I could tell he wasn't really seeing me. His thoughts were elsewhere, and they were heavy. The silence between us stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if he wanted me to say something, to ask him how he was feeling or why he seemed so tense. But something about his presence made me hold back. I could sense that whatever he was carrying, it wasn't a burden I was meant to share. Not yet, anyway. The sound of Ethan's footsteps echoed from upstairs, light and hurried. I could tell he was trying to wake up quickly, his socks shuffling across the wooden floor. When he appeared at the kitchen door, still in his pajamas, hair a mess and eyes half closed, Michael stood up to greet him. "Hey, man," Ethan said a little awkwardly, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "What's up?" Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he just stood there, staring at Ethan for a long beat, like he was weighing something in his mind. It wasn't until Ethan took a step closer that Michael spoke, his voice low but steady. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Ethan furrowed his brow, clearly confused. "What are you talking about? Did something happen?" Michael hesitated, then shook his head. "It's not something that happened. It's something I did. Something I should have told you before." His words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like they were about to break free of him, but Michael couldn't quite make himself say it all at once. I stood back, leaning against the counter, watching the two of them. Ethan was still trying to catch up, trying to make sense of whatever it was that had Michael so torn up. "What do you mean, man?" Ethan asked, his voice soft, but his eyes sharp, picking up on the tension in the room. "What is it? What happened?" For a moment, I thought Michael was going to back out, like he wasn't ready to face the truth. But then he took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with a kind of determination I hadn't seen from him in a long time. Michael's voice faltered, and he glanced at me briefly, like he wasn't sure how much he could say in front of me. "I'm not sure how to say this. I don't even know how to explain it. But I need to tell you, something I've been carrying for a while." Ethan exchanged a quick glance with me, his confusion turning into something deeper, something more like concern, maybe even fear. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Michael's. "You can tell me anything, man," he said, voice steady but quiet. "What is it?" Michael looked at me again, and this time I didn't hesitate. I gave him a small nod, letting him know it was okay to speak freely. I wasn't there for you when you needed me," he said, the words tumbling out like they were escaping against his will. "When your mom, when she got sick, I wasn't there for you, and I should have been." The world seemed to stop for a second. Ethan froze in place, his face going pale as he processed what Michael had just said. I could feel the room shift, like something had clicked into place, but it wasn't the good kind of click. It was the kind that makes your stomach turn and your chest tighten. Ethan's voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "What are you talking about?" I don't remember you being gone. You were there, right?" "I don't?" Michael shook his head, his hands trembling now as he reached out, as if trying to bridge the gap between them. "No, I wasn't there. I avoided you. I kept my distance. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was make it worse. I should have been there with you by your side, and I wasn't." The silence between them felt unbearable. Michael's words were like a dam breaking open, spilling everything he had kept inside for so long. And Ethan, my son, was standing there, his world shifting under his feet as he tried to make sense of this new reality. I wanted to say something, anything, to ease the tension between them. But I couldn't. I had my own memories of those days when Ethan's mom, when my best friend, was sick, and Michael's absence was something I had never quite understood until now. But there was something else, something deeper in Michael's eyes as he stood there, waiting for Ethan's reaction, that made me believe this wasn't the full story. There was more. There always is. Ethan looked at Michael for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't know that," he said softly. "I didn't know you felt that way. But I don't know what to say." Michael's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but he nodded, like he was expecting this, like he knew how hard it would be. "You don't have to say anything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I just needed you to know. That's all. I'm sorry for not being there." And with that, the air in the room shifted again. It wasn't a fix, it wasn't an easy resolution, but it was a start. Michael had come here to unburden himself, to finally admit the guilt he had carried for so long. And now, for better or for worse, Ethan knew. I could see it in his face that the weight wasn't entirely lifted from Michael's shoulders, but at least it was shared now. And that, for me, was the first step toward healing. For all of us. The air in the kitchen still felt thick, but it was different now. More like a quiet understanding had settled between the three of us, even if it wasn't fully spoken. Michael had let out what he needed to, and Ethan was still processing. I could see it in his eyes. The weight of the past was heavy, and for the first time in years, it felt like it was something we could finally talk about. Ethan sat down at the table, rubbing his temples, trying to make sense of everything Michael had just confessed. He was quieter than usual, and that concerned me more than anything. My son, who had always been so full of life and energy, now seemed distant, like the boy I once knew was suddenly hard to reach. I stood back, unsure of what role I was supposed to play in this. The mother in me wanted to comfort him, to wrap him in the familiarity of home, and ease his confusion. But I knew this wasn't something I could fix. It was something Ethan had to work through on his own. Michael sat across from him, his posture slumped, his hands still trembling slightly. He hadn't said much since his confession. His eyes kept flicking toward Ethan, waiting for some kind of reaction, but Ethan just stared down at the table, lost in his thoughts. "I don't know what to say," Ethan finally said, his voice low. "I mean, you were my best friend. You were there for me, like, all the time. I never knew you felt that way. I thought you were just gone." "I was gone," Michael said quietly, his voice raw. "I wasn't there when I should have been. I didn't even reach out. And that's something I can't take back. I thought if I stayed away, I wouldn't make things worse, but I should have been there. I should have stood by you." There was something raw in Michael's voice, something I hadn't heard in years. The boy I remembered had always been so full of life, always making jokes and keeping things light. But now the weight of the past had changed him, and I wasn't sure if that change could ever be undone. Ethan remained silent for a long time, and I could see him processing the words, his mind racing through memories that now seemed incomplete. I could feel the tightness in the air, the unsaid things hanging over us, and I knew it wasn't just Michael who was struggling to find the right words. "I don't get it," Ethan finally said, his voice strained. "Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just come back?" Michael swallowed hard, looking like the words were stuck in his throat. "I didn't know how," he said quietly. "I thought I was protecting you by staying away. I thought it was better if I didn't remind you of everything that was happening. But that was wrong. I should have been with you. I should have been there when you needed me most." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on both of them, heavy and impossible to ignore. It was clear that Michael had come here today to unload a burden he had been carrying for far too long. And it was clear that Ethan, as much as he wanted to understand, wasn't sure how to process it all. I wanted to speak, to offer some kind of comfort, but I knew this was something they needed to work through between themselves. As much as I wanted to take away their pain, I couldn't. This was their journey. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice small but steady. I don't know how to fix this, Michael. I don't know how to just forget all that time. But I don't want to lose you as a friend. I just don't know if I can go back to how things were. Michael nodded slowly, his eyes filled with regret. I don't want to go back either, he said softly. I just want to be here now. I don't expect everything to be okay all at once, but I want to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes. Ethan met Michael's gaze, and for the first time since Michael had arrived, I saw a shift. There was still pain in Ethan's eyes, but there was something else, too, a flicker of understanding. Maybe not forgiveness, not yet, but something that resembled the first step toward healing. I don't know how to make sense of it all yet, Ethan said. But I'll try. I'll try to understand. Michael let out a shaky breath, looking like he had just been given a small sliver of hope. That's all I can ask for, he said. I just want a chance to make it right. The moment stretched on, and I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of relief settling over me. It wasn't fixed, not by a long shot, but they were talking. They were both talking, and that was the first step. Just then, the doorbell rang, breaking the stillness in the room. I jumped slightly, startled by the interruption. I'll get it, I said, standing up. But as I turned to head toward the door, I couldn't help but glance back at the two boys. They were still sitting there, their conversation continuing, a quiet sort of truce between them. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find Mrs. Reynolds, Michael's mom, standing on the porch. Her face was pale, her expression tight with worry. She held a small box in her hands, the kind you might keep precious things in. "Hello, Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice strained. "Is Michael here?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "Yes, he's inside with Ethan." Mrs. Reynolds followed me into the kitchen, her eyes immediately locking onto Michael, who had stood up when he saw her enter. Her face softened a little, though I could tell she was trying to hide the anxiety behind her calm exterior. "Michael, sweetheart," she said gently, crossing the room to him. She reached out, touching his arm lightly. "I didn't expect you to be here today." Michael didn't speak right away. He just looked at his mom, and for a moment, it seemed like the weight of everything was about to collapse on him again. But then he took a deep breath and nodded. "I needed to talk to Ethan," he said quietly. "I needed to tell him the truth." Mrs. Reynolds didn't ask what truth. Instead, she simply placed the small box in Michael's hands. "I think you're ready to have this now," she said softly. "I couldn't give it to you before, but you're ready now." Michael looked down at the box in his hands, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's this?" His mother smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "It's something your father wanted you to have. It's time you knew." I stood back, watching the exchange, unsure of what was happening. The tension in the room had shifted again, but this time it wasn't just about the past. It was about something else, something that Michael was about to uncover. Ethan stood up slowly, his curiosity piqued by the exchange between mother and son. He walked over to Michael, who was still holding the box, his hands shaking. Mrs. Reynolds stepped back, giving them both space. "What is it, Michael?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Michael opened the box slowly, and as he did, I could see his fingers trembling. Inside the box was a small, faded photograph, yellowed with age, along with a few other items I couldn't make out. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. It was as if the world itself had stopped to wait for Michael's reaction. The photograph inside the box was old, its edges curled and worn with time. Michael held it carefully, as if afraid it might disintegrate in his hands. The image was of a family, Michael's family, captured in a moment that seemed so distant it felt like another lifetime. His father, a man I hadn't seen in years, was standing with his arm around Michael's shoulder, both of them smiling, looking like everything in the world was just fine. There was a warmth in the photo, a lightness that seemed so out of place now, considering everything Michael had just confessed. Ethan, standing next to Michael, looked at the photo curiously, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of it. "Who's that in the picture?" he asked quietly, his voice almost too soft for such a heavy moment. Michael stared at the photo for a long time, his lips parted as if he wanted to say something but couldn't quite form the words. Finally, he looked up at his mother, who had retreated to the far end of the room, giving the boys space. She looked back at him, her expression a mix of sadness and resignation. "That's your grandfather," she said, her voice strained, as if just saying his name brought back a flood of memories she wasn't ready to revisit. "Your dad. He wanted you to have this when you were old enough, when the time was right." Michael's hands trembled as he slowly passed the photograph to Ethan. "I didn't even know I had a grandfather," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper as he studied the picture. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the questions rising within him. What was the story behind this photograph? Why had Michael never spoken of his father, or of his grandfather for that matter? Mrs. Reynolds sighed, her hand resting lightly on her chest. She had been quiet for a while now, and I could sense she was bracing herself for something. Something big. "I never told you about him," she said softly to Michael, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to, because I didn't know how. Your father? He wasn't the man you think he was. I didn't want you to carry that burden. But now, you deserve to know the truth. You both do." Michael's eyes searched his mother's face, a storm of emotions churning inside him. "What are you talking about? What truth?" She looked down, taking a deep breath before meeting his gaze again. "Your father wasn't the man you remember. The man in that picture, he was different from who he became. He was a good man once, but that changed. He struggled with things, with demons I couldn't protect you from. And when he passed away, I didn't know how to tell you, how to explain it." The weight of her words hit like a thunderclap. I could see Michael's face pale, his grip on the photograph tightening as the truth started to settle in. His world, the world he had carefully kept in the past, was about to shatter. Ethan, too, seemed to understand that this wasn't just about Michael's father. It was about everything that had been kept in the dark. About the lies that had built walls between people who should have been closer. "You mean?" Michael's voice wavered. "You mean he wasn't who I thought he was?" Mrs. Reynolds nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a sadness I could feel in my bones. "No, he wasn't. And I didn't want you to carry that. I thought maybe if I kept it from you, you could just remember the good parts. But now, I see that it's only made things harder for you." For a long moment, the room was silent. Michael's hand was still gripping the photograph, his knuckles white. Ethan stood beside him, his gaze flicking between Michael and Mrs. Reynolds, unsure of how to navigate the emotional minefield that had suddenly opened up in front of him. I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. The secrets, the years of silence, the broken bonds, the way life just seemed to pull people apart without any warning. But something else was happening too, something that gave me hope. The truth was spilling out now, and while it was painful, it was also freeing. They were no longer living in the shadows of the past. They were standing in the light, confronting it together. "I wish you would have told me sooner," Michael said, his voice rough. "I wish you would have let me know, Mom." "I know," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. "But I was trying to protect you. I thought if you didn't know, you could have a better life. But I was wrong. I'm sorry." Michael nodded, swallowing hard, as he set the photograph down on the table between them. "It's just hard to understand all at once." "I know," Mrs. Reynolds said, her voice breaking. "But you don't have to understand it all right now. You just need to know the truth. That's all I can give you." Ethan, still standing by quietly, looked over at Michael, his face filled with understanding. "It's okay, man. You don't have to have all the answers. Not yet." Michael looked at Ethan, his eyes red-rimmed but grateful. "Thanks," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here, if I didn't have you to talk to." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's what friends are for, right?" I watched as Michael and Ethan shared a brief moment of understanding. It wasn't the same as it once was. Things had changed. The past had caught up with them, and there was no going back. But what I saw in that moment was something I hadn't seen in a long time. The first steps toward healing. The first real steps toward forgiving, toward allowing each other to be human and flawed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace settling into my bones. The truth was messy and painful, but it was also freeing. It was a beginning, not an end. I turned to Mrs. Reynolds, who was still standing by the door, watching her son and his friend with a quiet kind of sadness. She had carried her own burdens for so long, but now, at least, the weight was being shared. "You did the right thing," I said softly to her, my voice full of empathy. "They'll get through this. Together." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I hope so," she said quietly. "I hope so." And as I looked at the two boys, standing side by side in the kitchen, I realized something important. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that set us free. They might not make everything perfect, but they make room for something real, something lasting. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was far from it. But in that moment, in that kitchen, surrounded by people who had learned to speak their truths, I felt a quiet sense of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the scars of the past could start to heal. And that, I realized, was enough. Thank you so much for following along with this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. I'd love to hear where you're watching from, so drop a comment and let me know. Until next time.